government of Canada is going to be honest with the Indian people of Canada. Let us make this house a respectable house so that your people and my people will walk together as one, because your destination and our destination are of the same destination.
After many years in power, Pierre Elliott Trudeau was chairing his last constitutional conference. A month before, in an Ottawa blizzard, he had made the decision to resign.
Mr. Prime Minister, because we were whalers where we come from, we want to present you with a whaler's hat, Mr. Prime Minister. We have also walked in many blizzards.
Prime Minister Pierre Elliott Trudeau was given the very special gift of a whaler's hat by the Nuu-chah-nulth people. This gift symbolized friendship that was extended to the first people who came to this country. This respect and dignity, unfortunately, was repaid by subjugating Native Indian people and ignoring their history.
This is where they got my people when they caught them doing the potlatch, when the law swooped down and outlawed the potlatch. Some people went back to Guildford and Kincombe, Knockbuckdown, London Harbour. They went and put all their regalia in the caves and hid their stuff there, because wherever they went after on the north, they confiscated their regalia.
You remember there were all kinds of poles here? What happened to them?
A lot of them were stolen by American tourists. They used to come around these places in their yachts. That's what happened to the poles on the West Coast. They were stolen by movie stars, big shots. The government was stepping on us for our customs. The Indian Department was pretending to be our friend, but secretly they were helping the government to get rid of the Indian people. The whole general theme, as you can see, is a genocide. They want to get rid of us, that's all.
When the people around this table are trying to say the real war never really happened, there was never really a Holocaust, the Métis were never really oppressed, the Métis were never really beaten in a war. And I think we got to face and really understand that history has oppressed us, and since we have lost that war, we have been sitting back for 100 years waiting for this opportunity. And the thing I want to get across today, we don't want to waste that opportunity.
When you say you want to be under federal jurisdiction, I take it you want a land base. Who do you look to for the land base? I would assume that you're going to look to probably the federal government if you're brought under federal jurisdiction. Federal government then would have to look to the provinces to afford us the land. What if the provinces aren't prepared to afford us the land? Then how can you ever have equal status with Indians on reserves who don't have the land? Then would you ask us somehow to what? Start to pay out hundreds of millions of dollars to the provinces if they would be prepared to sell unoccupied provincial crown lands?
What we are talking about is the equality of people here. And to use your phrase, we're talking about a just society. It can't be just for some Aboriginal people and not for others. It has to be for all Aboriginal peoples, or else we then are dealing in hypocrisy.
This was to be the conference where nothing happened. Nothing was accomplished. Even Trudeau sensed it. The self-government proposal went nowhere. The Métis land question proposal went nowhere. And even the watered-down amendment on sexual equality voted at the first conference went nowhere.
Mr. Prime Minister.
Premier Hatfield was ready to make, if not a profound, at least a clear statement on where the conference was going.
Aboriginal women do not have real equality. If we can't allay the fears that have, I believe, been legitimately raised, then I think we have to ask ourselves, are we really sincere about anything? When we started on this course to deal with Aboriginal rights, I can't believe there is anyone that didn't know we would go in the direction that we have been going, that didn't know that the Aboriginal peoples were going to ask for self-government. If anyone listened, they've been very specific as to what they've meant, and they've been willing to compromise, and they've acted admirably. I'm not very proud of the way the First Ministers have responded. So I can't really, as I said, it's a truth, that's all. I can't discuss self-government with any conviction or any heart when I know we're not going anywhere. We're just not going anywhere.
What's the point? What do you want me to do? Adjourn?
No. But you did raise expectation and hope that the Equality Clause would be clarified, to use your word, if it needed to be clarified. And then because you didn't get the support of 7 men, you dropped it. That's not good enough. That's not what I meant when I said
What do you mean by
I
7
hope the
men?
federal government would take
7
leadership.
heads of elected government. The number is required in the Constitution that you and I accepted.
Now, Mr. Chairman,
I think you are giving argument to those premiers who said, for God's sake, let's not make another constitutional amendment. We made one last year, and you're telling us now that you changed your mind that evening or the next morning. We didn't. We put a lot of work into it, and we think it is good. And we didn't change our mind the next day. But you know, if we're going to change our mind tomorrow, I would argue that let's throw away the idea that we're going to come out with any constitutional court at the end of the day.
And yet we're talking about a fundamental right.
I wish you and your sisters would take it out of your head that somehow we're deliberately trying to frustrate the concept of equality. At least in the law, everybody is assured here, you hear, that we are not. You know, in a sense, you're equal when you think you're equal. And if you think you're unequal, the law won't change much. Simon?
Mr. Prime Minister, I consider myself an equal. I am an Aboriginal representative that represents both male and female persons in northern Quebec. And I've always tried to be very unbiased towards who I represent, because I feel that as people we have one interest, and that is our collective and individual rights. And all I'm saying here is that as someone that represents both sides, I'd like to see the Equality Clause once and for all settled. And it's now 3:35, and I don't see how we can go on much longer with this.
We said that a constitution would provide a framework on which our people could build their future. Now, this constitution is not building a framework. It is building a barrier to make sure that the Aboriginal people of this country are left out on the outside and are going to continue to be colonized from here on. And that I will not stand back and see happen. If I'm not back at these meetings, I will be back on the street level helping people to organize and put some pressure on the governments where it belongs. And there'll be more radical leaders at this meeting than I am.
You have failed. We haven't failed. You have failed to agree that Aboriginal peoples have the democratic and human right to self-government. You have self-government. You elect your member of parliament. You elect your provincial governments. You benefit from resource development on your lands. In the Arctic, we don't have the right to benefit from resource development, from our lands, from our resources.
Before the natural resources were discovered in the Arctic, the only interest that Canada had in this vast territory was to ensure that Inuit people were used as rangers to protect our sovereignty.
Right, stand at, ace!
easy. Johnny, come up here. Translate for me. TV? Can you come up here? TV. You explained to TV. TV, you've been in the Rangers for 20 years. And we have a certificate of service for you that has been signed by our general for the big boss in Ottawa, the chief of the defense staff.
Our village isn't on the sea. It's down there, at the end of the bay, protected from the winds. Our village is Sugluk. That's the sea over there. That's where we go hunting for our food. Eat before it freezes. Come, eat. It's this food and the way we eat it that allow us to survive here during the winter. This animal gives us its oil, its fat, its blood, its meat, its skin. All this is necessary for us. That's the way we are.
We don't want the people of Canada to have the impression that we're leaving this conference having failed totally and beat, because that's not the case. The world continues tomorrow, and we will continue these negotiations and discussions that I have identified.
As one who will leave at least the fight from this part of it, I would leave you with the wish that I think the Chinese interpret as a curse, but that I don't. May you live in interesting times. Puissiez vous vivre des années intéressantes. Conference is adjourned till another year and another chairman.
I'm well acquainted with the situation of the Aboriginal peoples and the problems they face, both in Manicouagan and in the rest of the country. I'm proud to be able to tell you that it was a Montagnais chief, Gaston Mackenzie, who proposed my candidacy at the Progressive Conservative nomination meeting in the riding of Manicouagan.
Having been a labor negotiator myself, I know what it means to be sitting on one side of the table and looking at pretty powerful interests on the other side. But that's not the situation today. We are here together to try to come to grips with problems common to all of us.
Brian Mulrooney, the great negotiator. It was his desire to make a deal. This desire was not reflected by the actions of the premiers.
We certainly in Alberta do not accept the fact that there should be anything other in our Constitution than two sovereign governments, the federal and the provincial level of government.
A great deal more clarification and/or negotiation is required before a decision can be made whether provisions should be added to the Constitution. I would add my voice to those who believe we should make haste with prudence, Perhaps if we cannot define fully, Prime Minister, what native self-government is, we should turn our minds to agreeing what native self-government is not.
First of all, Indian self-government isn't having all the non-Indian people leave the province of BC. Indian self-government isn't having the province take 50% of the revenue from resources underneath our reserves. And Indian self-government to us isn't having multinational corporations border on our reserves and destroy the resources which we live on.
And there was thousands of fish there just milling around in that.
Big boulders in the pool there.
I saved Helen Scow's life there. She fell in there and she couldn't swim. I couldn't swim either, but I jumped in and grabbed her. Somebody came along and pulled both of us out. We used to swim up there all the time.
That's a beautiful pool, isn't it? I've seen that pool.
Yeah. And it used to be, we used to throw rocks in there before we go swimming to scare the fish away because there were so many of them.
It was a big stream at one time for fish. It was one of the main chum recoveries in the inlet here was Charles Creek. Then it went down to absolutely zero. There was nothing in it.
Nothing up there now.
Well, what killed that fish?
The loggers, the dam in there. You know, slide and it built up, and then the fish couldn't get up. It was only 300 feet up the river. There's another one behind us here at O'Brien Bay.
They don't care about the environment.
But Indian self-government is having a fair share of those resources so that we can have a government that is independent rather than having the present situation we have.
If it is established in British Columbia, as is seeking to be established by the various native bands, that there is Aboriginal title to land, the consequences of that on the Treasury of Canada will be very major and very horrendous.
Mr. Prime Minister, I have a hard time accepting what the province of BC is saying, that you should spend money in buying land off them that they stole off us to give back to us. There's something wrong. There's something wrong with the system when you have to sell back something to somebody that they originally owned. And I think we got to get away from this kind of discussion around this table if they want to reach some real agreements about where Native people are going to lie in this country. Because you know and I know that the taxpayers aren't going to go broke if there's a land claim settlement for Indian people in British Columbia. All we're asking for is our rightful share in this country. And it's people like Mr. Bennett who are going to have to give up some of that land because it rightfully belonged to us to begin with and shouldn't be used as a scare tactic so that we can't have Indian self-government in this country.
The Aboriginal leaders were concerned about a proposal arrived at over the evening to remove from the Constitution the obligation to negotiate self-government.
The change we recommended to the federal proposal was to move the commitment to participate in negotiations out of the constitutional amendment and place it into the attached political accord.
This proposal represented that the right to self-government would not be included in Canada's Constitution and therefore would not be enforceable upon the provinces or territories.
Mr. Prime Minister, Saskatchewan helped design the accord, and we will obviously be supporting it.
This proposal seemed to rally the necessary majority of 7 provinces.
We are amending the Constitution. We know it is the supreme law of Canada. We know how important that is. And as long as we have the possibility to put a right in the Constitution rather than a principle, we're going to fight for that right.
Mr. Nungat?
We feel the pressure of having to say yes, and we do want to say yes, but at this time, we feel that the pressure we are under, with no recourse for the agreement we may agree to here being ratified by the people that we represent, in the 3 jurisdictions under which Inuit live in Canada is something we have to it's something that it's very heavy for me to say this, Mr. Prime Minister, and I don't want to stumble along, but some of our people are going to be penalized, we feel, or we know, if we say yes.
I think it would do damage to the process itself if we failed because of a misunderstanding to resolve or to possibly resolve something of great substance on behalf of the Aboriginal peoples.
What Prime Minister Brian Mulroney refers to as a misunderstanding actually represents the difference in attitude that exists at the constitutional table. On the one hand, we have the Aboriginal representatives talking about rights in the Constitution. On the other hand, we have the Prime Minister and the Premiers talking like used car salesmen about their desire to make a deal with no guarantee and no substance.
We have some substance on the table. We have the guts of a resolution. That's the beef. That's where it all is. There's no doubt in my mind, but the Premier of Ontario, Premier of Manitoba, New Brunswick, Prince Edward Island, Newfoundland, Nova Scotia, and Saskatchewan have indicated their support of the substance of what we're trying to do. We've got the horses right now, and we can make a deal.
Mr. Prime Minister, we are tired of fighting the rearguard action at all these conferences to protect the rights of our peoples. It was clearly laid out in the 1983 Constitutional Accord that this process was aimed at elaborating and finding mechanisms to implement our rights already recognized in Section 35. Now it would appear that the federal and some provincial governments are banding together to erode whatever rights we may have in the Constitution and to ensure that our rights will never be enforceable in the courts in Canada. In fact, the new proposal even goes so far as to remove the commitment to negotiate. For the Assembly of First Nations, the commitment to negotiate and conclude agreements is essential for setting the tone of goodwill. We cannot agree to the deletion of this commitment when the federal and provincial governments take the position that there is no right to self-government, as they did upstairs last night and early this morning.
The Assembly of First Nations are saying to you that when we organized ourselves into the Assembly of First Nations and we made our moves, that we told the public and the governments of this country that we had the inherent right to self-government, the governments and the public ridiculed us. We are hearing from the premiers around this table, many of the premiers, that our inherent right to self-government, there's opposition. But we will not abandon our position, nor back away, nor will we sleep on our right of self-government. Because we sincerely believe that if we don't achieve our point here today, we will do it at another time, so that the truth of what we're saying will become self-evident. Yes, I can only say that let us behold the turtle. He moves forward when he sticks his neck out. We are very serious in the concerns that we are raising now, because we feel that the neck that is out there is our neck. We are asked to say, let us take a great jump of faith in agreeing to this proposal. We have serious concern that that great jump may be into the pit of oblivion.
I come through here after being away for 43 years. I never saw any. I was so shook up when I came here because I'd never been here since my uncle was drowned. That they told me, get up, coming to the river. I was just laying down. Uncle Billy will come and call me. Kirby, my granddaughter, was with me. She's never been up here in her life. She said, what are you crying for? You're coming home. I said, yeah, that's why I'm crying. I never expected to come home again. I thought I was gone for good.